Okay, we're basically finished with that Malacha Makeh B'Patish. So the next thing we're going to learn about is carrying on Shabbos. Now, normally the Lamites Malachot, the 39 prohibitions of Shabbos, were things that were done in the Mishkan. There's two malachos that the Torah says separately. One is that you can kindle a flame in any of your domains on Shabbos, and that the Gemara has an argument why the Torah mentions that one separately than all the others. But the second one we find that the Torah explicitly says that you're not allowed to do it is carrying. When the Jews were building the Mishkan, and I'll explain what the domains are in a second, the place where the Mishkan was public domain. Where all the Jews gathered, it was a public domain. There are tents, the homes, whatever you want to call them, were tents obviously, so they were private domains. And Moshe Rabbeinu told the Jews on Shabbos, the Gemara learns out it was on Shabbos, Moshe Rabbeinu told the Jews, don't bring out any more from your house to the Mishkan for the benefit of the Mishkan. So the Gemara learns out from that pasuk that Moshe Rabbeinu told the Jews, don't carry from your houses, which is a private domain, to the place of the Mishkan, which is a public domain. And Taisus in the Gemara explains why does that need a separate pasuk to tell us you're not allowed to carry? Because like we discussed previously, carrying is different than any other malacha of Shabbos. All the other prohibitions of Shabbos, you're basically doing something to the object that you're doing it with. You plant, you harvest, you bake, you cook, you light a fire. You're changing something. You're changing the object. Yes. Carrying, you don't do anything. I take the thing here. No, it wasn't done. You're taking this object, you're carrying it from here, there, here. What are you doing to the object? You're not doing anything to the object. So even though they carried in the Mishkan, but without the pasuk, nobody's going to say because they walked in the Mishkan, you're not allowed to walk on Shabbos. Because they breathed in the Mishkan, you're not allowed to breathe on Shabbos. So carrying is not something that would normally be derived from the Mishkan itself, that you're not allowed to carry. Because again, carrying doesn't do anything to the object. Therefore, Taisus explains that the Gemara needs to learn it out from a pasuk. So therefore, halachically, there are four domains of Shabbos. It's called the Arba Shuyas, the four domains. Two of them are biblical, and two of them are rabbinic. Now, the two biblical domains, as we just mentioned, is a public domain and a private domain. What's the definition halachically of a public domain? So there's two opinions in halacha. One is anything that's 16 cubits wide, means a public thoroughfare that's 16 cubits, meaning just to round it out equally, 32 feet wide. Any public thoroughfare, okay, that people walk in, and it's 32 feet wide, would be a public domain. Other opinions say no, that's not enough to make it a public domain. You also need 600,000 people to make it a public domain. Why? Because where do we learn out the public domain? From the Mishkan. The area of the Mishkan is where all the Jews gathered. So over there was 600,000 Jews. So there's two opinions in halacha, what actually constitutes a public domain versus a public domain. One opinion says as long as people walk there and it's 32 feet wide, it's called a public domain. Other opinions say no, it's not enough. In other words, I'm not going into that law. Let's say Oakhurst over here, according to the first opinion, there's people walking and it's 32 feet wide, so that would be called a public domain.
Well, there were more than 600 Jews.
600,000 people.
There were more. There were 600,000 men.
Yeah, but that's what's counted as the number the Torah officially gives to the Jewish people. No, it's a good point. There are like 2-3 million Jews. But, yeah, but the amount the Torah says is Shishim Ribu. Okay, that's the definition of a public domain. What's the definition of a private domain? It has to be 4 tfachim by 4 tfachim. A tefach, okay, there's 6 tfachim in an amma, generally speaking. Sometimes 5, but generally speaking, 6 by the Mizbech. The Rambam says some of them were 5, some of them were 6. But generally speaking, in Halacha, an amma, which is a cubit, which is between 1.5 to 2 feet, is because there's 6 tfachim, which tefach is singular, in an amma, in a cubit. Now, how big is a tefach of an average sized person? In modern day language, it's between 3 to 4 inches. Okay? Between 3 to 4 inches. So something which is 4 tfachim by 4 tfachim, meaning, let's go to the strict opinion, 16 inches by 16 inches, plus it has walls 10 tfachim high. 10 tfachim high means 40 inches high. So in order to classify something as a private domain, it needs to have 16 inches by 16 inches with walls around it of high 40 inches. Sometimes 36. I mean, again, depends how you count a tefach. 3 inches or 4 inches, but that's basic. So realistically speaking, this bima would be a private domain. In other words, if somebody, let's say for argument's sake, Wilshire Boulevard is a Rishus Harabim. Let's say, okay? And somebody takes this bima, and it's on Wilshire Boulevard before Shabbos. If somebody would pick up an object on Wilshire Boulevard and put it onto this, they would biblically transgress carrying on Shabbos. If somebody would take from the table to the floor of Wilshire Boulevard, then they would constitute biblical carrying, from private to public and public to private. Okay? That's the definition of a Rishus HaYachid. Now, again, if it has walls 10 tefachim high, and it's 4 tefachim by 4 tefachim, that's considered a biblical Rishus HaYachid. Got it?
What is it used for?
What is it used for?
It's a personal space.
What is it used for? It's called a private domain.
Nobody ever constructs anything like that. What is it for?
I'll ask you a question. Okay, let's say a situation where there's no Erev in the city. So you're not allowed to carry in the street, correct? Can you carry in your house?
Yes.
Why?
It's a private domain.
What constitutes your house as a private domain? It's 16 inches by 16 inches. No, it doesn't matter if you live there or not. It's 16 inches by 16 inches, right? And it has walls around it.
No, it's not right. Where did you get it?
Where did I get it right? From the Gemara, from the
You're
Torah.
asking about the livable space, and you told me.
I didn't say livable space. I said it's called a private domain. So for instance, your house,
What's the use of it? Bring it down then.
I'll explain to you in a minute.
Okay.
This room is more than 4 tvach, more than 16 inches by 16 inches. There's walls all the way around it. So this is a private domain. Correct? No, I'm just explaining. Halachically, it's called a private domain. If somebody, now the parking lot over here, because there's walls all around, okay? Even though there's an opening, but that's where the car closes it up for Shabbos, so it's considered a wall. So then, this yard would also, the parking lot would be a private domain. So therefore, you would be allowed to carry in it from the shul to the lot, from the lot to the shul. It's not an issue. If somebody, let's say, for argument's sake, let's say Oakhurst or Wilshire would be a public domain, halachically, and there's no Erev, so you wouldn't be allowed to carry from this room to the street, or from the parking lot to the street for that matter, or from the street back to the parking lot. You wouldn't be allowed to carry because you're carrying from a public domain to a private domain, or private domain to public domain. Now, those are the two biblical domains. Now, there's another domain. It's called Carmelis.
So what happened with the 4 tefachim by 4 tefachim in this?
So that makes it a private domain.
That's the minimum size of the property.
Minimum size of a property to make it a private domain. That if you carry from a public to a private, you're transgressing Shabbos. But secondly, that in the private domain, you're allowed to carry.
If you
can't move him forward.
Minimum. It could be more.
Rabbi, if you had two of these tables on Rosh, let's say, which are two privates, can you take from one and put to the other if you just took it and didn't put it down and one to the other?
They're touching each other or they're separated from each other?
Let's say they're separated.
Okay, that's all. That's a big fat Gemara called Shabbos. Most of it talks about that.
The reason I'm asking is because
You're not allowed to carry rabbinically from private to private through public. Through public. Why? Because we're afraid you'll stop in the public. Right? In other words, if you, let's say your house is a block away, 2 blocks away, a mile away, it doesn't matter, yeah? Your house is private domain. The street, let's say for argument's sake, is a public domain. Can I carry from the shul to my house, not stopping, just carrying something in my pocket? Because all I'm doing basically is carrying from one private to another private. So the answer is rabbinically you're not allowed to. Why? Because you might stop in the street.
If you don't stop.
But that's why rabbinically you're not allowed to, because maybe you'll stop.
What did the Alter Rebbe start?
There was a whole thing with an Erev, and the Erev broke. It's a whole different story. It's Alter Rebbe's mother, not Alter Rebbe's daughter. So, what?
No, she just got married. And she showed that she loved her more than her son.
What was the situation there?
Huh?
Number one, it was the Alter Rebbe's mother, not daughter. Number one. Secondly, over there, they were in a small shtetl. There was an Erev. Yeah, there was no Rosh Hashanah there. There was an Erev, and so they were walking home from shul with the Talesim and the Gemaras and everything, and somebody came running and said that the Erev broke. So all the scholars who knew Gemara didn't know Halacha, because that's what the emphasis was not on Halacha. So now the question, they're stuck with Talesim in the street, what do? You can't put this farm on the floor. You can't. So she told them what to do. They should hand it, because in a public domain, up to 4 amas you're allowed to carry. So she told him somebody should 2 amas give it to somebody else, then give it to somebody else to go 2 amas, 2 amas, 2 amas, 2 amas, 2 amas, until you finally come to the house and put it in the courtyard, the whole thing. And they didn't know if she was right, so they went home, they looked up in Shechnah, they saw she was right, and all the scholars didn't know what the halacha was. But there was Alter Rebbe's mother, and not about whatever. Okay, next.
It's 16.
I know. Thank you.
Yeah, it's time Margaret.
Soon.
20.
You want the police to come?
Yeah. Okay.
if you guys
Next thing is a carmelis. A carmelis is something that's 4 tvachim by 4 tvachim, but it doesn't have walls 10 tvachim high. It has walls between 3 tvachim from the 12 inches from the ground, less, in other words, more than 12 inches from the ground, but less than 40 inches. So it's 4 by 4, it's a usable space, but it doesn't have proper walls of 10 tvachim high. So that, or Chachamim say, any big place that's not surrounded by walls, but if people don't go there, i.e., a bika, a valley. Okay, a guy has an open farm, no walls around it. It's not a public domain because people don't go there. It's not a private domain either because there's no walls around it. Or the sea, the ocean, things like that. River, that's called a carmelis. Not because it has walls necessarily, but because public doesn't go there. So, what? A field, bika. That doesn't have mechitzas. If it has mechitzas and there's hookup fladid, I mean, there's a lot of. Then it would have a din of a shasiyachim.
Why using the wire instead of wood is acceptable?
Because the concept of an erev is, good thing I have 2 pens. You see. There's halachic walls. I'll give you another example, and this we might have to discuss next week. If you have on your roof, Okay, let's say you have no roof, no fence on your roof. Okay, you go up to the roof and there's no fence. Even though halachically you need a fence, right? Nobody should fall off. Am I allowed, let's say this is my house, okay? And this is the roof. Am I allowed to carry on the roof if there's no walls going up? Huh?
Your own roof.
So what? Are there walls around it? The answer is yes. There are walls around it. Because there's a rule, Halacha Moshe Sinai, this was given to Moshe Rabbeinu at Har Sinai, that once you have kosher walls 10 tvachim high,
Goes all the way down.
halachically, the walls keep going up. Keep going up to the sky. Like a sukkah, the same thing applies by Shabbos. So let's say this is the roof of the building, even though there's no wall around the roof, but the fact that there's walls of the building, so halachically, once I have 40-inch wall, the wall keeps going up to the sky. And therefore, it's considered halachically as if the roof has 4 walls around it. Now, halachically, a wall, by definition, doesn't have to be a wall. Halachically, if you have a stick in the ground, and you have a string on top, not on the side, on top of the stick, okay? And then here you have another stick. The string goes from stick to stick, and then from the stick to next stick around the property. That is called a halachic wall. That's called a wall. You don't have a wall? Halacha Moshe Sinai. If you have what's called a Tzuras HaPesach, a form of a doorway, a doorway is considered a wall.
This is only vertical, not horizontal.
This is then
Right?
different.
What do you mean horizontal?
The wall going this way.
No, the walls don't go horizontal; they go vertical.
Only vertical.
Right.
The last example is only the same as Eruv.
That's the whole idea. Yeah. Machat is so